So where are you all from? Don't answer all at once. Is the place that you're from known for something? Something good, maybe? Something bad? You know, everywhere that I've ever lived, and I've lived in 5 states now and a few different places in those states, everywhere I've ever lived has had a local specialty. You know, something that it was known for, something that made it stand out from the crowd a little bit. People really take a lot of pride in that, don't they? The place where they're from, the thing that is unique to that place. I grew up in South Carolina, and in South Carolina, barbecue is everything. Barbecue is life there. Everything involves food, especially barbecue. You can't hardly go to an event in South Carolina that doesn't have barbecue involved, pulled pork, usually, in some form or another. In fact, South Carolinians love that barbecued pork so much, they say that they eat everything but the oink. That's the way they put it. And I've lived in upstate New York, too, and in upstate New York, they love chicken wings, right? Buffalo wings, which are the specialty there in many ways, not named for the animal that once wandered the plains, but for Buffalo, New York, which is the place where they were invented. I have to tell you, this is totally an aside, but I went down a rabbit hole on this. Where did Buffalo, New York get the name Buffalo, New York, right? Doesn't really make a lot of sense if you think about it. Apparently, there were French fur traders who named a creek near there Beau Fleuve, like beautiful creek, and that was somehow corrupted into Buffalo. That's one explanation for that. So next time you're on Jeopardy and it comes up, you'll know exactly what to say. I've also lived in the San Francisco Bay Area where the specialty was Dungeness crab, which was delivered angrily snapping still to Fisherman's Wharf. And in Kentucky, where I lived for a little while, they have this specialty called a hot brown, which is like a kind of open-faced sandwich if you wanted to design something to raise your cholesterol as quickly as possible. That was the specialty of the place. The food in Arizona is a little harder to pin down, right? Because so many people here are from everywhere else. But there are still amazing specialties. Tucson in particular, by the way, is this world city of gastronomy, as I'm sure you know, with some of the best Sonoran Mexican restaurants anywhere on planet Earth. And so I've already had to make pilgrimages to El Charro and Guadalajara Grill and discovered a few local specialties myself. Tucson, I think, is an especially exciting place to sample the local cuisine. It's quite good. The point is that the places where we live, the places we're from, have a distinct kind of character, don't they? These are things we know. And food is often one of the simplest ways of seeing that distinctiveness because it's about what the place produces. What the place produces. You know, you grew up in Hatch, New Mexico, you know all about those chilies, right? It's what the local land produces, what comes from the ground, what people eat. It becomes a distinctive part of their character. But there are other things that are unique. You know, sometimes there's local customs or special little funny things that happen. Up in Chandler, they used to have an ostrich festival every year. They used to have ostrich chariot races, which was a whole new thing to me. I've never lived anywhere that had an ostrich festival. It's the kind of thing that makes your town unique. Maybe there's something in Oro Valley or North Tucson does something, I don't know, that's distinct that makes it special, right? That gives it some special character. Did you notice when you heard that gospel reading today the incredible out-of-the-blue prejudice that people seem to have for Nazareth, the place of Jesus' birth? Or not his birth, the place where he's from, right? That's immediate prejudice. Why is that? The context of this passage is kind of interesting. I know there's a lot going on here in a very short period, and let's unpack it a little bit because it's kind of fascinating. The context is that Jesus is heading down to Galilee, which of course is where he does the majority of his ministry, and he calls Philip to accompany him, and John, the gospel writer of this gospel we're reading, reminds us that Philip and Andrew and Peter are all from this place called Bethsaida, which is on the northern shore, kind of the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee. And during this rather mundane interaction, Philip is in the middle of sort of getting things together to go and leave with Jesus, and he bumps into an old friend of his named Nathanael, and he tells him about Jesus. And Nathanael has this very strong and very funny reaction. Nathanael says, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Those are like the first words that come out of Nathanael's mouth. Because apparently the place where Jesus is from had a bad rap. Apparently it was known for something negative. We're not exactly sure why. No one really knows exactly. That doesn't stop academics from coming up with interesting answers for speculating about it. But for some reason, Nathanael just has it in his head that Nazareth is a bad place to be from. Well, I'm not really sure. I've been to Nazareth a couple times, and I have to tell you, it's a pretty average-looking Israeli town as far as I can tell. There's a beautiful, small, old city. There's this incredible modern basilica built over the house of St. Mary, and there's a whole lot of kebab stands. Lots and lots and lots of kebab stands. But in Jesus' time, Nazareth was a tiny little outpost. I mean, it was an out-of-the-way place that would have been considered the back of beyond at that time, probably. The population's just a few hundred people, maybe. It was Nowheresville, right? And the implication is that Jesus is just another hayseed from Hicksville. That's probably what Nathanael's thinking. He's just another, backcountry kind of prophet with delusions of grandeur. And you can imagine Nathanael kind of rolling his eyes as he listens to Philip's gleaming account of this man, Jesus, who he's just met. But Nathanael's incredulous. He has doubts. And if we're honest from ourselves, we would probably be right there with him, right? The Messiah is here and the Messiah is from Nazareth. It's like saying, folks, the Messiah is here and the Messiah is from Gary, Indiana. The Messiah is here, and the Messiah is from Bakersfield, California. No offense to anybody from Gary or Bakersfield, but you know what I'm getting at, right? These aren't exactly tourist hotspots. It's like you live in Los Angeles or something, and you feel like you're the center of the world, and you think that if somebody important is going to be from somewhere, they're going to be from LA or Beverly Hills or something. They're not going to be from Bakersfield. Nothing good ever comes out of a place like that. That's the prejudice. That's what people thought. But notice, by the way, I love the response that we get from Philip, the way that Philip responds to this. There's no argument. There's no sort of twisting of arms or attempts to explain or explicate what's going on. There's no debate. Philip simply tells Nathanael to see for himself. What does he say? He says, "Come and see." Come and see. I love that. Because he knows that meeting Jesus, interacting with Jesus, seeing what Jesus is all about, that's going to do the rest. That will do the rest. And so the two friends hike over to meet this man from Nothing Town, with whom Philip is so enamored. And this other amazing thing happens. Jesus sees Nathanael coming, and he has this gleam in his eye, and he says, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there's no deceit." And you have to read between the lines here because it's not exactly clear, but Nathanael is floored by this because I think Nathanael thinks that honesty is like one of his main character attributes. It's something he prides himself on. And Jesus has seen right to the core of his being. Jesus understands him. And Nathanael says, "Where did you get to know me? How do you know me? How do you know about me?" His eyes are suddenly blinded by dust, by the hot sun. He can barely even look at Jesus. "I saw you under the fig tree over there," Jesus replies. "I picked you out of a crowd. I called you. I know you, Nathanael," his eyes seem to say, "more than you know yourself." By the way, there's an amazing conclusion to this story. Again, it's a very subtle conclusion. It's the kind of thing you have to kind of read between the lines on, but it's wonderful. 2 years later, Nathanael is fishing with all the other disciples in the Sea of Galilee, and it's a few days after Jesus has been executed. But he's with them. They're back on the Sea of Galilee. They're probably all experiencing shock and grief. And a stranger calls to them from the shore. And the stranger tells them to cast nets in a certain spot, and the nets come back filled with fish. And so they come over to the shore, they make a fire on the beach, and they eat with this stranger. And when they break bread together, Nathanael knows that it's Jesus who's spoken to them. A Jesus who they don't recognize at first, who doesn't look like the person who's just been executed, but they know nonetheless, this is the Christ. And you can see how that story has kind of mirrored itself, right? Just as Jesus knew who Nathanael was, saw to the core of his being, Nathanael now is able to recognize Jesus. And his heart sings out. Come and see, Philip had said. Come and see. And how many wondrous things had Nathanael seen in those 2 years? Those 2 brief, incredible years following that man from Nazareth. You know, one of the really interesting things to me, folks, is how in Scripture, Jesus so often declines to explain his actions or his work or his purpose in the kinds of ways that we want him to, the kinds of ways we expect him to. You know, Jesus never writes anything down. He doesn't give us a manifesto and sort of hand it to us and say, this is it, this is how everything is going to be. He doesn't come with a whole set of precepts of the law like Moses did coming down the Mount of Sinai. Jesus gives us very little documentation to satisfy our judgmental opinions. Instead, when people ask a question about who he is, what his motives are, what he's about, what he's doing, Jesus' answer is always the same. He says, look at what I'm doing. Look at my actions. There's this incredible example of this when John the Baptist sends envoys in the Gospel of Luke to go and sort of check in on Jesus and see if he's really the Messiah. Because, you know, John said, I'm here before him, but I don't know who it's going to be. And so he sends envoys to go and check in and see if this man from Nazareth is really the person who's been waited for. And when they ask Jesus who you are, they came from John the Baptist, for goodness sakes. Jesus doesn't answer. He doesn't give a straight answer anyway. What he says is, go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and good news is proclaimed to the poor. Those are the signs that Jesus offers. What do my actions say about me? Remember, too, that when the Pharisees asked Jesus, why do you spend so much time with notorious sinners? Why do you spend so much time with prostitutes and tax collectors, Jesus? His answer is basically the same. He says, wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. That's a direct quote, by the way. Wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. Holy wisdom vindicated by action. Nathanael, like most people of his time, like most people still today, right, was interested in where people came from as kind of a window into their character. He dismissed Jesus at first because Jesus came from the wrong village, the wrong place, the other side of the tracks. He didn't have the pedigree that one would have expected from someone with something good to say. But Jesus offers a different way of understanding. Jesus says, by their fruits you will know them. That's what Jesus says about prophets. By their fruits you will know them. It's the things that someone does, their actions, that tell us about their character. In John's Gospel, for example, we are given 7 signs that are things that are supposed to teach us about Jesus. These signs are miracles. But more importantly, there are 7 signs, meaning symbols of who Jesus is and what he's about. They are actions that are supposed to teach us. So, for example, Jesus feeds 5,000 people, and then Jesus says, I am the bread of life. Jesus heals someone who's been born blind, and then Jesus says, I am the light of the world. The actions of Christ teach us in ways that even his words can't. They are actions that underline the very essence of his character and his mission and his purpose. In understanding who Jesus is and in understanding our own selves, we should look at the fruits that we produce. What are the outcomes of our actions in our life? You know, if you could make a list of everything you've ever done, what would it say about you? Is that a terrifying thing to think about? It is for me, right? But you know, it shouldn't be terrifying because it's not our actions that save us, it's our faith. It's our faith, but our works, our fruit, do show the nature and calling of our lives. I think that's undoubtable. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Nathanael asks. But the answer was always plain to see. And in the end, Nathanael learns that it's not genetics, it's not ethnicity, it's not place of birth that defines a person's character, but the actions that they take, the choices that they make, the things that they actually do. And Nathanael spends the next 2 years following Jesus. He breaks bread with Christ on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and he follows Jesus to the ends of the earth. How do we measure character? Is it by fancy diplomas on walls? Is it by being born to the right kinds of parents in the right kinds of places, going to the right kinds of schools, having the right sort of look or dress? Or is it by what we have done to bring about the reality of God's kingdom? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? And the answer is, come and see. Holy Lord, you gave us the example of your life, that we might follow in your footsteps and walk along your path. Give us the grace, like Nathanael, to come and see what you have done and what you are doing and what you will do through us for the salvation and reconciliation of the world. In your name, amen.